Sophia was hiding under a desk, not metaphorically. Not hiding under a desk the way people say they want to disappear during an embarrassing moment. Literally, physically. Under a large, expensive mahogany desk, in an office she had absolutely no business being in. Holding her breath, with one heel broken off her shoe and a folder of documents pressed against her chest like a shield. Listening to the sound of footsteps stopped directly on the other side of the door. The handle turned. She made herself as small as a 26-year-old woman with natural hair the size of a small weather system could possibly make herself. The door opened. Footsteps entered. One person, measured, unhurried. The walk of someone who owned every floor they stepped on. She watched the shoes cross the room. Dark leather, expensive. The kind that were made in a country that took shoes very seriously. They stopped at the desk. A chair rolled back. And then the person sat down, directly above her. Sophia closed her eyes, opened them, looked up at the underside of the desk and had a very quiet, very intense conversation with God. A phone rang on the desk above her. It was answered immediately, in Korean, in a voice that was low and even, and had the particular texture of someone who had never once in their life been rattled by anything. She understood enough Korean to know that whoever was above her was not happy about something. She understood enough Korean to know that they were giving instructions to someone. And she understood enough Korean to know that the instructions ended with words that, loosely translated, meant, find her, find her. Sophia looked at the folder in her hands, then she looked at the shoes, then she looked at the folder again. She had exactly 3 options. She could stay under this desk for the duration of a phone call that could last anywhere between 2 minutes and the rest of her natural life. She could make a run for it and accept whatever happened next. Or she could do the thing her mother had always said was both her greatest gift and her most exhausting quality, which was open her mouth. The phone call ended. Silence. And then the voice above her said, in perfect English, without any change in tone whatsoever, "You have 5 seconds to come out from under my desk. But let us go back." Because Sophia Adanna Mensah did not end up under a mafia boss's desk by accident. She ended up there by a very specific series of choices, each of which had seemed reasonable at the time, which is the story of most disasters. Sophia had come to Seoul the way many people come to Seoul, chasing something. In her case, it was a job. Not just any job. A position at one of the most prestigious architectural and interior design firms in the city, Han & Associates, which had a waiting list for internships that was, by general estimate, roughly as competitive as getting into heaven. Sophia had applied 3 times. The 3rd time, she had submitted a portfolio that her professor in Accra had called aggressively original, which Sophia had chosen to interpret as a compliment. She got the call on a Tuesday, standing in her small apartment in Yeonnam-dong, eating rice and stew she had made because Korean food was wonderful, but sometimes a girl needed her mother's recipe. She screamed. Her neighbor knocked on the wall. She screamed again, but quieter. She had been at Han & Associates for 4 months when the thing with the boss began. Not that boss. The other one. Han & Associates occupied the 14th and 15th floors of a glass tower in Gangnam. The 14th floor was theirs. The 15th floor belonged to something called K's Holdings, which was, on paper, a private investment and asset management company. In practice, nobody on the 14th floor talked about the 15th floor in the same way that nobody in a nice neighborhood talks about the house at the end of the street with the permanently closed curtains. Sophia had noticed this on her 2nd week. She had asked her desk neighbor, a sweet, perpetually anxious Korean man named Dongwoo, why nobody ever used the elevator to 15. Dongwoo had looked at her the way you look at a child who has just asked why we don't pet strange dogs. "We just don't," was all he said. "But why?" "Sophia SSI, we just don't." She had accepted this for approximately 6 weeks. Then, on a Wednesday morning, she had gotten into the elevator carrying a stack of rolled blueprints and a coffee and her bag and her phone, and an apple she had been planning to eat but had forgotten about, and she had pressed 14, and the elevator had gone to 15. She had not pressed 15. The doors opened. It was different up here. Quieter. The same glass and steel as below, but with a different atmosphere, the way some buildings feel inhabited and some feel occupied. There was a reception desk, but no one at it. A corridor leading to several doors. And at the end of the corridor, one door that was slightly ajar, with light coming through the gap. Any reasonable person would have pressed the close button and gone back to 14. Sophia stepped out. She would explain this to her best friend Abina later that evening on a video call, and Abina, who was in Accra and had excellent judgment, would say, Why? And Sophia would say, I don't know, I just wanted to see. And Abina would say, you wanted to see what, Sophia? And Sophia would say, the vibe. And Abina would simply stare at her through the screen for a long time. The vibe on the 15th floor of K's Holdings was expensive and quiet and slightly tense in the way that rooms are tense when important things happen in them regularly. The walls had no art. The furniture was all dark and clean and chosen by someone who cared about function first. There were no personal items anywhere that she could see. No photographs, no plants. No evidence that the people who worked here had lives outside of it. She had been standing in the corridor for about 90 seconds just looking when she heard voices from around the corner. Multiple people, getting closer. She panicked, took 3 steps forward, opened the nearest door, the one that was ajar, the one with the light, and went inside. It was an office. Large, the desk was enormous. Behind it, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of Gangnam that was, even in her current state, absolutely stunning. The voices passed in the corridor, faded, gone. She exhaled. She turned to leave, and saw on the corner of the desk a folder, open with her company name on the top page. Han and Associates in the header, unmistakable. She should not have looked. She knew she should not have looked. Every version of good sense she had, accumulated over 26 years of life in Accra and 4 months in Seoul, said, do not look at that folder, Sophia. Close the door. Go back to 14. Eat your apple. She looked at the folder. What she saw in the 30 seconds she allowed herself before conscience reasserted control was enough to make the blood in her veins do something complicated. Acquisition documents, her firm's name, numbers, and at the bottom of the first page a signature over a title that said, Director K's Holdings. Someone was buying her company. Someone on the 15th floor was buying her company and nobody on the 14th floor knew. She grabbed the folder without deciding to. It was a full-body reflex, the kind that bypasses the brain entirely and goes straight from eyes to hands. She grabbed it and then she heard the footsteps in the corridor returning. And she did the only thing available to her, which was drop behind the desk and fold herself into the smallest possible shape. And that was how Sophia Adanna Mensah ended up under the desk of the most dangerous man in Gangnam. 5, the voice said, above her, patient as a glacier. She came out from under the desk. She stood up with what she felt was considerable dignity given the circumstances, smoothed her skirt with one hand, held the folder with the other, and looked at the man who had just counted down her exposure. He was looking at her with an expression she could not immediately classify. Not anger, not surprise. Something more precise than either, the expression of someone who has encountered an unusual variable and is deciding how to integrate it. He was, she made note of this against her will, quite something. Korean, early 30s, the kind of face that looked like it had been designed with uncomfortable attention to detail. Sharp at every angle, dark hair slightly grown out. Eyes that were very still in the way of people who are always watching and rarely reveal what they see. He was in a dark suit with no tie, the top button of his shirt open, which on anyone else might have looked casual, and on him looked like a calculated concession. He was sitting in his chair with perfect ease, one arm on the desk, looking at her like she was a moderately interesting problem. She looked back at him. I got off on the wrong floor, she said. He looked at the folder in her hands, and then picked up my documents. I was going to put it back. After reading it, I didn't read it. You read enough to still be holding it. He tilted his head very slightly. Sit down, I'd rather stand. I wasn't asking. He reached across the desk, and she had the very specific experience of someone who has made a mistake and can see all the consequences approaching at walking pace. But before he could take the folder, she placed it on the desk herself. Deliberate, like she was choosing to give it, not having it taken, something crossed his face, the same ghost of recalibration she would come to recognize. Your name, he said. Sophia. I work on 14. I know who works on 14. Then you already know my name. I wanted to hear you say it. He looked at her steadily. Do you know what you read? Enough. Enough to be a problem or enough to be useful, she blinked. That was not the question she had expected. Excuse me. Those are the only 2 options available to you right now. He was not unkind. He was also not soft. He spoke the way certain buildings are built, clean lines, no unnecessary ornamentation, structurally sound. You read a document you were not supposed to see, in a room you were not supposed to enter, on a floor you were not supposed to visit. What happens next depends entirely on which of those 2 things you choose to be. Sophia looked at him for a long moment. She thought about Dongwoo's face when she had asked about the 15th floor. She thought about her job, her visa, her apartment in Yeonnam-dong, her mother's pride, and the portfolio she had submitted 3 times. "What does useful look like?" she asked. The corner of his mouth moved, just barely. "Interesting? I'm not interesting. I'm practical. Practical people don't hide under desks. Practical people hide under desks all the time when the alternative is getting caught somewhere they shouldn't be." She straightened. "What does useful look like?" He studied her for another moment. Then, "What is your position at Han? Junior interior design consultant. How long? 4 months. Your portfolio. What about it?" "I've seen it. It was submitted as part of the acquisition review." She felt something cold move through her. "You've been reviewing our files." "I've been reviewing everything." No apology in it, no cruelty either, just fact. "Your work is the best thing in that company." She did not know what to do with that, so she filed it somewhere and kept going. "What are you planning to do with Han and Associates?" "That depends." "On what?" "On whether the people there are worth keeping." He said it the way someone else might discuss reorganizing a filing system. "You have a gift for space. The way you think about how people move through buildings, it's not common. Are you complimenting me while simultaneously telling me you might absorb my workplace?" "Yes, that is a very specific kind of rude." Something happened in his face again. She was starting to understand that his face did not do large things. It did small things, millimeter adjustments that carried enormous weight. "My name is Kang Jihoon," he said. "I run K's Holdings. The acquisition of Han and Associates is finalized in 30 days. You will not speak of what you read to anyone on your floor. And if I do, then useful becomes problem and we have a very different conversation." "Is that a threat?" "It is an accurate description of cause and effect." He looked at her. "Go back to 14, Sophia, and next time the elevator takes you somewhere unexpected, press close, I know." "I was going to say knock first." He turned back to his desk, dismissal complete. "Your shoe is broken." She looked down, her heel still snapped. She had forgotten about it entirely. "I'm aware. There's a cobbler on the ground floor. I know where the cobbler is." "Good." He was already looking at the papers in front of him. "Close the door on your way out." She closed the door on her way out. In the elevator going down, she pressed 14, and it went to 14, and she stood there with her broken heel and her racing heart, and the very clear understanding that she had just met someone who was going to be a significant inconvenience. She was right. She had no idea how significantly. She did not tell anyone. She wanted to. Every time Dongwoo complained about their quarterly review being delayed, every time her supervisor mentioned the company restructuring with vague anxiety, every time someone on the floor talked about Han and Associates in the tone of people who did not know a countdown was running, she felt the information sitting in her chest like a stone. But she did not tell. She was not sure why at first. Then she was honest with herself. She had looked at Kang Jihoon across that desk and seen someone who kept his word, and she had decided, in the way you decide things before you have fully thought them through, that she would keep hers. She did not see him again for 2 weeks. Then she saw him everywhere. It started at a coffee shop near the tower, a place she went every Tuesday for their sweet potato latte because Seoul had invented the sweet potato latte, and she felt this was its highest contribution to civilization. She was sitting by the window with her sketchbook when he walked past outside. He did not look in. She only recognized him by the walk, the same measured, owns-every-floor quality that she had catalogued under the desk. She looked back at her sketchbook. The next time, she was in the lobby of the tower when the elevator opened, and he stepped out with 2 men she recognized from the corridor on 15, all 3 of them mid-conversation, and he crossed the lobby without looking up, and she was already stepping aside before she had consciously registered him. The 3rd time, she was at a pajangmatcha in Yeonnam-dong on a Friday night with her colleague Minji, eating tteokbokki and talking about nothing important. And she looked up, and he was at a table across the tent, alone, with a glass of soju and a phone, and he was already looking at her. She looked away first. When she looked back, he was on his phone again, and she could not tell if she had imagined it. "You okay?" Minji was watching her. "Fine, the tteokbokki is spicy. It's the same spice as always." "I think my tolerance is going down." Minji looked unconvinced. Sophia ate her tteokbokki and did not look across the tent again, which required more effort than she would admit. The next Monday, there was a message on her work phone. Internal system. From an extension she did not recognize. Floor 15, 6 p.m. Use the stairs, not the elevator. She stared at it for a full minute. She typed, "Why?" The reply came in under 30 seconds, "Because I need someone with your eye for space, and I would prefer it not be discussed on 14. She typed, "You could hire someone. I'm hiring you. Temporarily. Come at 6. She thought about this all day. She thought about it through a client meeting, through a lunch she ate too fast, through an afternoon of CAD work where she made 3 errors she never made. At 5:55, she put her things in her bag, told Dongwoo she had an errand, took the stairs to 15, and knocked on the door at the end of the corridor. Ko Durawa Anus? Durioa, come in. She came in. The office looked different at 6 in the evening. The Gangnam skyline turning gold outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. The room's sharp lines softened by a light that had nothing to do with the man sitting at the desk, and yet somehow suited him. He had a floor plan spread out on the desk, large, detailed, clearly commercial. There's a building, he said without preamble. We acquired it last year, 8 floors, Seongdong-gu, built in the late 80s. I want to know what it can be. She set her bag down and approached the desk, looked at the plans. Her eyes moved the way they always moved over floor plans, fast at first, then slow, then fast again as the space began to have dimensions in her mind. What's the current use? Mixed. Offices on the upper floors. Ground floor has been vacant for 2 years. Why? Irrelevant. She looked up at him. He was watching her look at the plans with the same precise attention he brought to everything. It's not irrelevant. A space's history affects its possibilities. If the ground floor was vacant because of structural concerns, that's a different conversation than if it was vacant because of bad tenancy or wrong market positioning. A pause. Bad tenancy. Okay, what do you want it to become? I want to know what it should become. That is why you are here. She pulled up a chair without asking, sat down, and looked at the plans properly. He did not say anything about the chair. He turned the desk lamp slightly so the light fell better on the drawings, which she noticed and did not comment on. She studied for 15 minutes. He did not rush her, did not speak. She could feel him watching her think, which should have been uncomfortable and was instead oddly steadying, like being observed by something that has no interest in judgment, only in accuracy. Community and commercial hybrid, she said finally. Ground floor split, 1/2 creative market space, flexible stalls, the kind that rotate tenants monthly so the space stays alive. The other half anchored by something that draws consistent foot traffic. A bookshop, ideally. Independent, or a small performance space. Expensive. Less expensive than continued vacancy. And the area is changing. Seongdong-gu is the kind of neighborhood that rewards investment in character rather than function. If you build something people care about, they come back. She looked up. He was looking at her with that expression she was beginning to catalog, not the recalibration one and not the ghost of something one. This was different, more settled. Like something confirmed. Continue, he said. She continued. For 40 more minutes. He asked questions that were brief and precise and showed a grasp of space and use that surprised her. He was not pretending interest. He was genuinely engaging, and when he pushed back on something she said, it was not dismissal but testing. And she pushed back on his pushback with the confidence of someone who knows when they are right. At the end, she sat back and looked at the plans. You're going to need an actual architect for the execution. I have architects. I needed someone who could see it first. He began rolling the plans up. Same time Thursday, she stood. Picked up her bag, stopped. Can I ask you something? You can try. Why me? You've seen my portfolio. I'm junior. There are people on 14 who have been doing this for 10 years. He looked at her levelly. Because they see what buildings are, you see what they could be. He handed her the rolled plans. Take these, think about the ground floor layout, rough sketch only. She took the plans, and Sophia. She stopped at the door. This stays between us. I know how to keep things between us, she said. I've been doing it for 2 weeks. She left. In the stairwell, she pressed her back against the wall and breathed for a moment. Then she took out her sketchbook and started drawing. Thursday came, then the following Monday. Then Thursday again. It became a pattern, stairs at 6. Knock. Durioa. The desk and the plans and the Gangnam skyline going through its colors outside the window. She brought her sketchbook. He brought questions. They argued about ceiling heights and materials and the difference between designed intimacy and accidental intimacy in public spaces. And he listened when she was right and said so without making a ceremony of it. And when he was right, she acknowledged it with the clean brevity she had learned was the language he respected. Between sessions, she thought about him more than was advisable. She told herself it was professional investment. She told this to Abina on their weekly video call with enough confidence that Abina let it go for 2 whole weeks before saying, Sophia, I need you to be honest with yourself. I am being honest. You spent 12 minutes describing how he holds a pen. It's an unusual grip. I was noting it from an observational. Sophia. Abina. Is he fine? A pause. That's not relevant. Is he fine? Architecturally, yes, his facial structure is very strong. Oh my God, it's a professional observation. SophiaAdanna. I'm hanging up. Don't you dare, she hung up. Abina called back immediately. Sophia let it ring 3 times before answering, which Abina correctly interpreted as admission. Tell me about him? There is nothing to tell. Tell me about the thing there is nothing to tell about. Sophia looked at the ceiling of her small apartment. Outside, Yeonnam-dong was doing its evening thing, warm and low and full of the sounds of people eating and talking and living. He is not easy, she said finally. None of the interesting ones are. He's precise about everything. He doesn't say unnecessary things. He doesn't do unnecessary things. When he's in a room, it's like the room decides what it is. And when you're in the room with him, she was quiet for a moment. Like I know what I am. Abina was quiet too. Then gently, Sophia, what does he actually do? Investment, asset management. And what else? She thought about the men in the corridor, about the way the 14th floor didn't talk about the 15th floor, about the sound of his voice on the phone the day she was under the desk, flat and certain, and carrying a weight that had nothing to do with business hours. I don't know all of it, she said. I know enough. Is it safe? I think, she stopped. Started again. I think he would not let anything happen to me. That's not the same as safe. No, she agreed, it's not. Abina sighed, a long, fond, resigned sigh. Be careful, okay? And keep your exit clear. Always. I love you. I love you too. She put the phone down and picked up her sketchbook, and on the page that was supposed to be the Seongdong-gu ground floor layout, she had drawn, without realizing it, the view from his office window. She closed the sketchbook. She opened it again and kept drawing. The first time the professional lines blurred, it was his fault. She was very clear on this. It was a Thursday, later than usual, because they had disagreed about something and neither of them had been willing to stop disagreeing until the disagreement had been fully processed from every angle, which had taken an extra hour and a half. Outside the window, Gangnam was fully dark, bright and layered and enormous. She was gathering her things when he said, without looking up from the desk, "Have you eaten?" She stopped. "What? It's past 8. Have you eaten?" "I know, but I was going to. There's a place nearby. Come." That wasn't a question. No, he stood, adjusted his jacket. "You argue better when you've eaten. I need you at full capacity Thursday." She stared at him. "You are aware that is the least romantic dinner invitation in human history." "I wasn't," he stopped, the faintest color at the back of his neck. "I am not inviting you to." "I'm coming," she said, "but I want Galbi. Not somewhere quiet and expensive, somewhere with actual fire." He looked at her. "Deal," he said, and something in his face shifted in a way that she was going to think about later for an embarrassing amount of time. They went for Galbi. It was a small, crowded, loud place in a basement near Apgujeong that he clearly knew well because the owner greeted him with comfortable informality and seated them in a corner booth without being asked. Sophia grilled the meat because he reached for the tongs with the energy of someone who had never grilled anything in his life, and she intervened immediately. "You're holding it wrong. I'm holding it correctly. You are holding the tong like you have never encountered a tong before and the meat is going to burn. I know how to use. Watch." She took it from him without ceremony, turned the short ribs with practiced ease, pressed them flat. "See," he watched, said nothing. But when she handed the tongs back, he held them differently. She noticed but did not mention it. She was gracious like that. They talked. Not about the building, not about work. She had assumed that was all they had and was mildly surprised to discover it was not. He asked about Accra with genuine interest, not the polite geography-based questions people asked when they did not really want to know but wanted to seem curious. He wanted to know what the city looked like in the early morning, what the architecture was like in the old quarters, whether there were buildings she loved. She told him about the house her grandmother had grown up in, a colonial-era building in Jamestown that had been in the family until it wasn't, sold during hard years, and how she had gone back to photograph it at 16 and stood outside it for a long time thinking about what buildings held that people didn't. He listened with complete attention, the kind of listening that does not plan its response while you speak but actually waits until you are done. "That's why you do what you do," he said. "Maybe." She turned a piece of Galbi. "What about you? What about me? Why do you do what you do? And I don't mean the assets and acquisitions version, I mean the real reason." He was quiet for a moment. He looked at his glass of beer and then at the flame on the grill between them and then at her. "Control," he said, "over my own choices, over who has power near the things I care about." "What do you care about?" A pause, longer than the others. "Fewer things than I used to, more carefully." She looked at him in the low, warm light of the basement grill and felt something shift under her feet, Not dramatically, not like a movie. Just quietly, the way furniture moves a room when you are not looking. She looked back at the grill. "This needs to come off," she said, lifting the short ribs, "or they'll get tough." "Okay," he said. It was not about the ribs. She became fluent in him the way you become fluent in a city, gradually. And then suddenly, and then you cannot remember what it was like not to know it. She learned that he arrived at his office before everyone and left after everyone, not from workaholism, but from a specific relationship with quiet that required the building to be empty. She learned that he drank his coffee without anything in it, and found this deeply unreasonable and told him so. And he looked at her like she had said something in a language he did not speak. She learned that he had a younger sister he talked about in the brief, fond, exasperated way of people who have loved someone their whole life. She learned that the books in his office were read, actually read, and that he had opinions about them that were sometimes wrong and always interesting. She learned that when he was thinking hard, he went very still in a way that was easy to misread as disengagement, but was actually the opposite, full presence, pointed inward. She learned that he laughed very rarely, and when he did it was small and real, and landed somewhere in her chest. She learned that he had noticed things about her too, and kept them with the same care he kept everything. He remembered that she needed noise in the background to think, not music specifically, just ambient life, and had started leaving the office windows slightly open on the evenings they worked. He remembered that she found formal presentations nerve-wracking in a way that her confidence concealed, and started having her talk through concepts standing up rather than seated, which helped, and he had noticed this without her telling him. He was not easy, she stood by that, but he was consistent, and in her experience, consistent was better than easy because easy ran out. The acquisition of Han and Associates was announced on a Wednesday morning. Sophia was at her desk when the email came from leadership, and the floor went from ordinary Tuesday rhythm to the specific kind of stunned noise that happens when people receive information their bodies have not yet processed. Some people were relieved, it meant stability, investment, no layoffs apparently. Some people were anxious, all of them were talking. Sophia sat very still at her desk and read the email twice. K's Holdings, effective date in 2 weeks. New structure, leadership to be announced. She looked at Dongwoo, who was reading the same email with the expression of a man whose world had just reshuffled its furniture. "Did you know?" he asked, which was a general question to the room and not specifically to her. "No," she said, which was partially true. She had known something was coming. She had not known the specifics. It was, she had learned, the kind of information he gave in exact portions, enough to prepare, not more than necessary. She lasted until lunch. Then she went to the stairwell, climbed to 15, and did not knock. He looked up when the door opened. Something in his expression, quick, automatic, before it settled back to neutral, that she would think about later. "You could have knocked," he said. "You could have told me." She was not angry exactly. She had thought she would be. "I knew it was coming. I just didn't know today. The announcement was timed by the board." "I know." She came to the desk. Looked at him. "Is my position secure?" "Yes, you're sure." "Sophia?" His voice dropped a note. "I said yes." She breathed out. Looked at the Gangnam skyline out the window, now familiar as a photograph she had lived with for months. "People down there are scared. They shouldn't be. The restructuring benefits them. They don't know that yet. Fear doesn't wait for information." He looked at her. "What would you have me do?" "Come downstairs. Don't send an email. Go down and talk to them." "I don't." He stopped, started again. "That is not how these things are handled. It is if you want people to trust the transition rather than fear it." She looked at him steadily. "You know how to be in a room and make it decide what it is. Go down and make it decide it's okay." A long silence. "That's a very strange way to phrase that. You're a very strange person to know." She picked up her bag. "I'm going back to 14. Think about it." She went back to 14. He came downstairs an hour later. She found out through Dongwoo, who came to her desk with wide eyes and spoke in the specific tone reserved for unexpected apparitions. "The K's Holdings director is on the floor. He's just standing there talking to people." Dongwoo sounded personally affronted. "He's explaining things." "Good," Sophia said and looked at her screen. "Do you know him? We've spoken." She turned a page. "Is he good at it, talking to people?" Dongwoo thought about it. "He's a bit intense but clear. Mrs. Park just stopped crying, so..." He considered this. "Yeah. Good, I guess." Sophia did not look up, but she smiled at her screen, small and private, and then put it away and went back to work. The building in Seongdong-gu was coming together. Her sketches had multiplied into proper drawings, and the proper drawings had multiplied into detailed proposals. and the proposals had been reviewed in sessions that had stretched from 1 hour to 3. And she had started bringing food to these sessions because she had learned that he forgot to eat when he was focused, and that an unfed Kang Jihoon made poor decisions about ceiling heights. "You're feeding me like a stray," he said one evening, looking at the triangle kimbap she had set beside his papers. "You've made 3 structural errors in the last 40 minutes. Eat, I have not made errors." The mezzanine clearance. A pause. He picked up the kimbap. She won that one. The night the first full presentation was ready, she laid it out on the desk, full drawings, material samples, a written concept brief that she had rewritten 4 times, and stood back and let him look. He went through it slowly. She watched him the way she had learned to, reading the small adjustments in his face the way you read weather, the slight tightening that meant he had a question, the stillness that meant he was impressed but would not say so immediately, the almost imperceptible softening around his eyes that was the closest he got to openly delighted. When he finished, he set the last page down and looked at her. "Ko I enus, ko chincha enus, ko cha enus, ko duetta enus," he said, "Ijajinja jal duista." This really came out well. She had heard him say similar things about documents, reports, plans. She had never heard him say it in Korean, which was the language he used when something bypassed his professional register entirely and came from somewhere more direct. "I had a good brief," she said. "You had a mediocre brief and made it into this." He gathered the pages carefully. "You should lead the presentation to the contractors. I'm junior staff, not on this project." He looked at her levelly. "On this project, you are the lead. I'll arrange the credentials. The team will defer to you." She stood very still. "Jihoon." He looked up. She had started calling him that 3 weeks ago, and he had not corrected her, which had been its own form of permission. "This is the kind of project I came to Seoul for." "I know. You're giving it to me because the work deserves it, not because of—" She stopped, gestured between them, the space they occupied that neither of them had named. "The work deserves it," he said, simply, completely. "And I do not mix those things." She believed him. She believed him because in 4 months of working together and however many evenings under the Gangnam skyline, she had never once felt that his faith in her work was conditional on anything else. He was many things, he was not that. "Okay," she said. "I'll lead the presentation." "Good." She started gathering her things. He reached past her to retrieve a sample she had left, and they were very briefly in the same small space, and he did not move back immediately, and neither did she. The Gangnam skyline blazed through the window. "Sophia." His voice was very quiet. "I know," she said, equally quiet. "This is complicated. I've been aware of that since I was under your desk." Something happened in his face that she could not entirely read, warmth and weight and humor all at once, compressed to almost nothing. "That is not the romantic origin story most people would want." "I'm not most people." "No," he said, "you're not." He did not say anything else. She did not ask for anything else. They stood in the space they had been building toward for months, neither of them crossing it yet, but both of them knowing it was there. She picked up her bag. "Thursday," she said. "Thursday," he said. She took the stairs down, and on the 7th step she stopped and pressed her hand flat against the wall and breathed for a moment with her eyes closed. And the building held her the way buildings sometimes do, solid and steady, and indifferent. It was Junho, not Junho from the other story, different Junho, her story's Junho, who worked on 15 in a capacity she had not fully mapped, and who had the specific talent of being exactly where things were happening, who warned her first. "There are people," he said, coming to find her on 14 with the composure of someone delivering mildly important administrative news, "who have noticed that you spend time on 15. She kept her eyes on her screen. "I work on 15, occasionally. People notice things." "What kind of people?" He was quiet for a moment. "The kind who would use your presence there to create a problem for Mr. Kang." He set a coffee on her desk that she had not asked for. "I'm not telling you to stop. I'm telling you to be aware." She looked at him. "Is he in danger?" "Mr. Kang is always managing some form of danger. That is the nature of his position." Junho looked at her with the expression of someone who is being precise on purpose. "You would be a different kind of vulnerability, when he hasn't had before." She thought about that long after Junho had gone. Thought about it on the subway home, standing with one hand on the overhead bar, looking at her reflection in the dark window as Seoul blurred past outside. Thought about what Adanna had said, "Keep your exit clear." Thought about what she had said back, "I think he would not let anything happen to me." That evening she went to 15. Not because it was Thursday, just because she needed to see him. He looked up when she came in and immediately knew something was different. He put the phone down mid-sentence, which she had never seen him do. "What happened?" Junho talked to me? A pause. His jaw tightened infinitesimally. What did he say? She told him. He listened with the full stillness that meant he was taking it in completely. When she finished, the room was quiet for a moment. He was right to tell you, he said finally. I know, she sat in the chair across from him. Are you going to tell me to stay away from 15? He looked at her. I'm going to tell you that there is a version of this that protects you better. And what version is that? One where we are more careful. Careful, she repeated. About how this appears, who sees it, when? She looked at him across the desk she had hidden under, the desk they had spread plans across for months, the desk that had been, in its way, the entire geography of them. Jihoon, Sophia, are you asking me to hide what this is, or are you asking me to protect myself? He was very still. Both, I would prefer both. Those are not always the same thing. I know. Something moved in his face, genuine and unguarded for a moment. I have not, he stopped. Started again with the precision of someone who does not say things they do not mean. There are not many people I have wanted to protect. I find that I do not handle it gracefully. She looked at him for a long time. The skyline outside was doing something beautiful. She did not look at it. You have never been ungraceful with me, she said. He breathed out, slow and almost invisible. This is going to be complicated, he said. You said that already. It bears repeating. I've survived complicated before, she stood. And Jihoon, the next time someone is coming and you need me to know, maybe send a message before I end up under a desk again. The corner of his mouth. Definite this time? Definite. I'll keep that in mind, he said. She left. In the stairwell, she took out her phone and called Abina, who answered on the second ring and said, Tell me everything. And Sophia leaned against the wall of the stairwell in a tower in Gangnam on a Seoul evening and said, okay, and started at the beginning. The Seongdonggu presentation was on a Tuesday. She wore her best blazer. She was early. She had her materials in order. She had been ready for 3 days. What she had not been ready for was him walking in and sitting at the back of the room. She had not known he was coming. He had not told her. He sat down with 2 of his people with the particular quality of someone who is present but does not intend to take up space, and he looked at her with a single brief nod. She nodded back. Then she turned to the room full of contractors and consultants and project managers, and she did what she had come to Seoul to do. She spoke for 40 minutes. She talked about the building's history and what history costs to ignore. She talked about the Seongdong neighborhood as a living thing that needed to be met on its own terms. She talked about the ground floor concept with the specificity of someone who had sat with it for months and the confidence of someone who knew it was right. She answered questions with the ease of someone who had argued every point already, across a mahogany desk with someone who did not let anything go unchallenged. When she finished, the room was briefly quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something has landed. She looked at the back of the room. He was already looking at her. He said nothing. He did not need to. His expression was the fully settled, confirmed version of that thing she had been cataloging for months. She read it as simply as she would read a floor plan she knew well. The room moved into questions and discussions and the ordinary machinery of project advancement, and she stood in the front of it and managed it all. And at no point did she feel like junior staff on a 15th floor favor. She felt like herself, fully, in the city she had come to on purpose, doing the work she had always been made for. After the meeting, the room emptied in stages. She was gathering her drawings when she heard the door close and turned, and it was him, the last one there. Well, she said, they'll move forward. I know they'll move forward, that was visible. How was the presentation? He crossed the room and stopped a few feet from her, and looked at her with the expression she did not yet have a name for but was the one that did the most damage, the warm and weighted one that lived between his professional register and whatever lived underneath it. Komwadaka inus, koheya inus, kohudi inus, komadukesa inus, he said quietly. Emwalego heya halji morujaseo, I don't know what to say. That's new, she said. You always know what to say. Not right now. He took one step closer. You were extraordinary, she looked at him. Was that so hard to say? Yes, said with complete honesty. I am not, he paused, expressive about things like this. I've noticed. I'm telling you now. I heard you, she held his gaze. I'm going to need you to keep telling me, not constantly, but sometimes. I can do sometimes. Then we'll be fine. He looked at her in the empty boardroom with the Seoul afternoon outside and the rolled drawings between them and everything they had built over months in a building he owned, and she had been meant to design, and she had ended up inhabiting in a completely different way. He reached over and took the rolled drawings from her hands, very gently, and set them on the table. Then he tucked a loose piece of her natural hair back from her face, one careful movement, like he was doing something he had thought about doing for a long time and was going to do right. Sophia, he said, yes. Ko dungsini enus, ko cha enus, dengsini joha, I like you. She raised her eyebrows. That's what you went with, you like me? The full smile then, rare and real and transformative. Very much, he added, extremely. To an extent that I have found professionally inconvenient for several months. She laughed, bright and full, and the room caught it and kept it. That's the most romantic thing you've ever said. I'm aware it's not much. No, I genuinely mean it. For you, that was poetry. She picked her blazer up off the chair. I like you too, Kang Jihoon, to an extent that I have also found professionally inconvenient. He watched her put her blazer on with the expression of someone who has been handed something they did not expect to be able to keep. Dinner, he said, not because you argue better fed. Why then? Because I want to. See, that was better. She picked up her bag. Galbi again, if you want. I want. She moved toward the door, then looked back. And this time I'm not grilling. You need the practice. My technique was, civilian, your technique was civilian, come on, he came. They ate Galbi and she taught him to grill, and he was not as bad as she had made him feel, which she admitted under questioning. And he looked at her with the expression that was her favorite and said nothing. And she talked about the building, and he talked about his sister, and they stayed until the owner started making pointed closing gestures, and left at 10 walking side by side in the Seoul night. At the intersection near her subway entrance they stopped. The city moved around them, ordinary and enormous. Thank you, she said, for the project, for trusting me with it. Thank you for seeing it right. She looked up at him. I need you to understand something, Jihoon. Tell me. I know what your world involves. I've known since I was under that desk. I'm not asking you to make it simple or pretend it's something it isn't. She held his gaze. I'm asking you to be honest with me about what matters when it matters. He looked at her for a long time. I can do that, he said. Then we start there. Okay, the city glowed. Her subway entrance lit the pavement at her feet. His car was somewhere behind him and his people and the world that ran on 15 and below and in places she did not yet know. He reached down and took her hand. Not dramatically, not as a statement. Just took it lightly the way you hold something you intend to hold carefully. She looked at their hands. I'm going to say good night, she said, before this gets embarrassing and I say something sentimental in public. I would not mind. I know. That's why I'm leaving. She squeezed once and let go. Good night, Jihoon. Ko cha enus, ko ga enus. Jalga, go safely, she went. She did not look back, which required effort. At the top of the subway stairs, she took out her phone and typed one message to Abina. I think I'm in trouble. Abina replied in 4 seconds, tell me everything. She typed back, tomorrow, I'm smiling too hard to type. Abina sent 17 emojis, and a voice note Sophia did not open until she was on the train. And when she opened it, Abina was simply screaming, just uninterrupted joy. And Sophia sat on the late-night Seoul subway with her head back against the seat, and smiled at the ceiling, and felt the city moving beneath her. Solid and alive, and full of the kind of stories that don't announce themselves, that begin instead on wrong floors, under desks, with broken heels and documents you should not have touched. She opened her sketchbook. On the next blank page she drew the intersection, the street lights, the shape of a man standing at a corner in a city that moved around him like water around a fixed point. She drew it from memory. She had been paying attention.